My name is Farah Torres, and I'm 26 years old. I had just finished a double shift at the hospital where I work as a radiology technician. My feet were aching, my scrubs smelled like antiseptic, and all I wanted was to get home, shower, and call my fiancé Ethan before he started his overnight patrol. I had no idea that by the time I merged onto the highway, my entire life was about to detonate in slow motion. It started 3 days earlier. My younger sister Danny called me crying, the way she always calls when she needs something. She said she was behind on rent, that her landlord was threatening eviction, that she had nowhere else to turn. The number she gave me was $15,000. I listened. I stayed quiet for a long time. And then I said no. Not because I didn't love her. Not because I had some cold heart that couldn't feel her panic through the phone. I said no because I had lent Danny money 4 times before, twice for rent, once for a car she sold 6 months later, and once for a business idea that never made it past a logo. None of it came back. Not a single dollar. And this time, $15,000 was more than 2 months of my salary. It was money I had saved for the deposit on the house Ethan and I were planning to buy together after our wedding in the spring. Danny cried harder. I held my ground. She hung up on me. Within an hour, my mother called. Then my father. Each conversation was the same. I was selfish. I was cruel. I had abandoned my family. I thought I was better than everyone now that I had a real job. My mother said things I won't repeat here because even now they make my chest tighten. My father told me I should be ashamed of myself. I tried to explain. I tried to say that I had given plenty, that I had limits too, that loving someone doesn't mean destroying yourself for them. They didn't want to hear it. By the end of the night, I had been blocked on everyone's phone except my mother's. And only because she wanted to keep sending me paragraphs about what a disappointment I had become. I stopped answering. I went to work. I tried to breathe. 3 days passed. On the 3rd evening, I got off my shift just after 9 at night, climbed into my car, a white Honda Civic that I bought myself, registered in my name, insured in my name, paid for entirely on my own, and pulled onto the main road heading toward my apartment. The radio was low. I remember thinking about whether Ethan and I should do a small wedding or invite more people. I remember thinking about paint colors for a kitchen. Normal thoughts. Safe thoughts. The lights hit me from behind before I even reached the highway entrance ramp. Red and blue, flooding my mirrors, a sharp burst of the siren that told me this wasn't a suggestion. I felt my stomach drop the way it does when you've done nothing wrong but your body doesn't know that yet. I pulled over immediately, put my hazards on, kept both hands on the wheel. Another patrol car pulled up ahead of me, blocking the front. That's when I understood this wasn't routine. 2 cars meant something specific. Something serious. I heard the loudspeaker before I saw anyone move. Driver, keep your hands visible and do not reach for anything. My hands were already shaking. I pressed them flat against the steering wheel and looked straight ahead. The officer approaching from behind had his hand near his holster. I could see that in my side mirror. My throat closed completely. The tap on the glass came hard. I turned my head slowly, the way you do when every instinct is screaming at you to move carefully, to not be misunderstood, to survive this moment without making it worse. And then the officer leaned down to window level. He pulled off his sunglasses. His face went from professional to something I had never seen on him before, something between fury and devastation, and he said, quietly, in a voice that was nothing like his work voice, "Baby, what did they do now?" It was Ethan. My fiancé. My Ethan, in full uniform, his badge catching the highway light, his jaw tight and his eyes already scanning me the way he always does when he's checking if I'm hurt. He already knew. He could see from my face that I wasn't a criminal. He could see from my face that something had been done to me. I couldn't speak. I just started crying, the ugly kind, the kind you can't perform or control, the kind that comes from somewhere deep that you didn't know was full until it suddenly isn't anymore. Ethan straightened up. He looked at his partner, who had come around from the second vehicle. He said 3 words I will never forget for the rest of my life. Then he turned his body camera deliberately, slowly, intentionally, in the direction of my parents' house, which was less than 2 miles from where we were standing. And he made a call. What happened in the next 40 minutes changed everything. It changed what I understood about my family, about the law, about the lengths that people who claim to love you will go to when you refuse to be controlled. And it changed what I understood about the man I was going to marry. Ethan didn't raise his voice. That was the thing that stayed with me long after that night ended. He never once raised his voice. He stood on the shoulder of that highway with trucks rushing past us, his body camera recording everything. And he spoke into his radio with the kind of controlled calm that only comes from someone who has practiced keeping themselves together when everything around them is falling apart. His partner, Officer Reyes, stood a few feet away, and I watched her face as she listened. Even she looked uncomfortable with what she was hearing, because what Ethan was doing in that moment wasn't just helping his fiancé. He was building a case. He had already run my plates the second the call came through dispatch. My name, my registration, my insurance. Everything clean, everything current, everything exactly as it should be for a car that belonged to the person sitting inside it. But the report filed against my vehicle listed my parents as the complainants. They had told the police that the car had been taken without permission, that it was missing from their property. The problem with that story, the problem that Ethan caught immediately and that my parents had clearly not thought through, was that my car had never been on their property. Not that week. Not the week before. The last time I had parked in their driveway was 4 months earlier at a family dinner, and I had driven myself home that same night. The report wasn't just wrong. It was fabricated. And filing a false police report is a crime. Ethan called his sergeant first. He explained the situation without editorializing, without emotion, just facts. The registered owner was present and in possession of the vehicle. The complainants were the owner's parents. There was no evidence of theft. And the report appeared to have been made fraudulently. His sergeant told him to document everything and that someone would follow up with the complainants directly. Then Ethan walked back to my window and crouched down so we were eye level. He asked me if I was okay. I told him I didn't know. He asked me if I wanted to tell him what had happened between me and my family. I took a breath and told him everything: the phone call with Danny, the $15,000, the way my parents had spoken to me, the 3 days of silence that followed. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Farah, they used the police as a weapon against you. That's not something I can look the other way on. Not as your fiancé and not as an officer." I understood what he meant. I also felt the weight of it. Because no matter what my family had done, they were still my family. There was still a part of me sitting in that car that was a little girl who had eaten Sunday dinners at that table and fallen asleep on that couch. But that part of me had to make room for the adult woman who had just been pulled over at gunpoint on a public highway because she said no to a loan. 2 officers visited my parents' house that same night. I wasn't there for it, but Ethan told me later what happened. My mother answered the door and initially tried to claim there had been a misunderstanding, that she thought the car had been taken without her knowing. The officer who spoke to her pointed out that the car was never registered to her address and asked her to clarify exactly how she had come to believe it was stolen. My father came to the door midway through and made the mistake of saying too much. He mentioned the argument, mentioned that I had refused to help Danny, mentioned that he thought someone needed to teach me a lesson. He said those exact words. The officer documented all of it. My parents were not arrested that night. But they were formally cautioned, the false report was flagged on record, and they were informed clearly that any future false reports filed against me or my property could result in criminal charges. Danny was not at the house. She called me 2 days later, not to apologize, but to tell me that I had humiliated the family. I let her finish. And then I told her, calmly, that I loved her, but that I would not be spoken to that way, and I ended the call. I won't pretend the months that followed were easy. There were weeks when I missed my mother so badly it felt physical, like something had been removed from my body without anesthesia. Ethan and I had long conversations late at night about family and boundaries, and what it means to love people who hurt you. We didn't cancel the wedding. We got married the following spring in a small ceremony with close friends, his family, and 3 members of my extended family who reached out privately to say they were sorry for what had happened. My parents were not there. That is the sentence I still have to sit with sometimes. My parents were not at my wedding. Not because I banned them. Because I gave them the opportunity to acknowledge what they had done and they chose not to take it. I left that door open for a long time. I still check my phone some mornings hoping for a message that hasn't come yet. I'm still not sure that door is fully closed. But I know now that love does not require you to accept being harmed. I know that protecting yourself is not the same as abandoning your family. And I know that on a highway at 9 o'clock at night, with red and blue lights flooding my mirrors and my hands shaking against a steering wheel, the person who showed up for me completely was the man I was going to marry. Sometimes the person who sees you most clearly is the one who runs your plates and already knows you're innocent before you say a single word. Sometimes love doesn't look like flowers or soft words. Sometimes it looks like a man in uniform crouching outside your car window on a dark highway, pulling off his sunglasses and saying your name like it's the only word that matters. Ethan never asked me to choose between my peace and my family. He just stood beside me while I figured out that I deserved both and that I could survive getting neither if it came to that. That kind of love doesn't make the pain disappear, but it makes you believe you can carry it without being crushed by it. And sometimes, that is more than enough.